Hello, everyone, and welcome back to English Mind Journey, the podcast where we help you improve your English while building confidence, developing a growth mindset, and becoming a more effective communicator. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Mike. We're really happy you're here today. Whether you're listening on your way to work, exercising at the gym, taking a walk, or simply relaxing at home, thank you for spending a few minutes with us.
Today's episode is about a problem that affects millions of English learners around the world. And the strange thing is, most people don't even realize it's happening.
In fact, this problem might be the biggest reason you're still struggling to speak English fluently. Not your grammar, not your vocabulary, not your pronunciation.
And that's hard to believe, because those are usually the things people focus on.
Exactly. Most learners spend years collecting vocabulary, memorizing grammar rules, watching English videos, reading books, listening to podcasts, yet somehow, speaking still feels difficult.
I think many listeners know exactly what that feels like. There have been moments when I understood almost everything someone said in English. I could follow the conversation, I knew the words, I understood the meaning. But the moment I needed to respond, everything disappeared.
Almost like your brain suddenly stopped working.
Exactly. It's such a strange feeling. You know the answer, you know the language, but nothing comes out.
And if you've experienced that before, you're definitely not alone. Because today we're going to uncover what's really happening inside your mind during those moments.
And by the end of this episode, you might discover that the thing holding you back isn't a lack of English, it's a habit.
A habit so common that most learners believe it's normal.
Translation.
That little voice in your head, the one that says, first think in my native language, then translate, and only then speak.
If that sounds familiar, stay with us. Because understanding this one habit could completely change the way you learn English.
And later in today's episode, we're going to share a simple exercise that many learners say help them start thinking directly in English. No expensive course, no complicated method, no native speaking partner required.
Just a simple shift in the way you use your brain.
Exactly. But before we get there, let's talk about something interesting. Have you ever wondered why some learners seem to become fluent much faster than others?
I've wondered that many times.
Most people assume the answer is talent
Or intelligence.
or memory. But what if that's not true? Let's imagine two English learners. We'll call them Alex and Emma.
Okay.
Alex and Emma started learning English at the same time. They attended similar classes. They watched similar videos. They studied for roughly the same number of years, and both of them knew thousands of English words.
So on paper, they looked very similar.
Exactly. If you tested their vocabulary, the scores would be close. If you tested their grammar, the scores would be close. If you asked how long they'd been learning English, the answers would be similar.
Then what happened?
Something interesting. When it came time to speak, their experiences were completely different.
How so?
Alex struggled. Every conversation felt stressful. Every answer felt slow. Every sentence felt like a puzzle. He constantly worried about making mistakes.
I know that feeling.
Many learners do. Now, let's look at Emma. Emma wasn't perfect. She forgot words sometimes. She made grammar mistakes. She occasionally mispronounced things. But she communicated. She spoke. She shared ideas. And most importantly, she wasn't afraid.
So, what was the difference? Was Emma naturally gifted?
No. Was she smarter? No. Did she know more vocabulary? Not really.
Then what made her different?
The answer was hidden inside their thinking process. Alex translated. Emma didn't.
That's it?
That's it.
That sounds almost too simple.
It does, but let's look more closely. Imagine someone asks Alex a simple question. What did you do last weekend? Seems easy, right?
Very easy.
But inside Alex's brain, something complicated begins to happen. First, he creates the answer in his native language. Then he searches for English vocabulary. Then he checks grammar. Then he rearranges the sentence. Then he worries about pronunciation. Then he worries about whether the answer sounds natural. And finally, he speaks.
That sounds exhausting.
Because it is. And here's the problem. All of that might only take 3 or 4 seconds. But in a conversation, 3 or 4 seconds feels like forever.
Especially when someone is waiting for your answer.
Exactly. Now let's look at Emma. Someone asks, "What did you do last weekend?" Her brain immediately creates a simple English thought. "I visited my parents." Or, "I stayed home and watched movies." That's it.
No translation?
No translation, no mental dictionary, no grammar inspection, no endless analysis. Just an idea connected directly to English.
So Emma isn't necessarily speaking better English. She's simply reaching English faster.
Exactly. And that distinction changes everything. Because fluency isn't only about knowledge, it's about access.
What do you mean by access?
Think about your vocabulary like a giant library. Many learners already have thousands of English words stored inside their minds. The books are there. The knowledge is there. The problem isn't the size of the library. The problem is finding the right book quickly enough when a conversation starts.
That's such a good analogy.
Some learners have huge libraries, but every time they need a word, they spend minutes searching through the shelves.
While fluent speakers seem to know exactly where everything is,
Exactly. Same library, different access speed. And here's where things become really interesting. Many learners don't even realize they're translating.
because they've been doing it for so long.
Exactly. It becomes automatic, like driving the same road every day. Eventually, you stop noticing the route. You just follow it.
So translation becomes invisible.
And that's why so many learners say things like, "I know the words. I understand English. I can pass tests, but I still can't speak."
Because the real problem isn't knowledge.
It's processing, and that's good news.
Why?
Because processing can be trained. Your brain is designed to adapt. It's constantly building new pathways, new habits, new connections.
So we're not stuck with the translation habit forever?
Not at all. But before we talk about how to change it, we need to understand why it exists in the first place. And the answer might surprise you, because translation isn't actually bad, at least not at the beginning.
Really?
Absolutely. Imagine you're learning your first English words. How else would you learn them? You see an apple. You learn the word apple. You connect it to something you already know. Translation helps.
So translation isn't the enemy.
No. The problem starts when translation becomes permanent. Think about training wheels on a bicycle. They're useful when you're learning. But imagine keeping them on for 10 years.
You'd never learn real balance.
Exactly. Translation is like training wheels. Helpful at the beginning, limiting later on.
That's such a powerful image.
And in the next part of today's episode, we're going to explore how your brain builds language pathways, why some pathways become stronger than others, and most importantly, how you can begin creating a direct connection between your thoughts and English.
Because once you understand that process, everything about language learning starts to make more sense.
Stay with us, because the next idea might completely change the way you practice English from this day forward.
Welcome back. Before the break, we talked about Alex and Emma, two learners with similar English knowledge but very different speaking experiences. And we discovered that the biggest difference wasn't talent, grammar, or vocabulary. It was the way they processed language.
Exactly. And now we're going to explore something fascinating. The reason your brain keeps choosing translation, and more importantly, how you can teach it a different way.
I think this is the part many learners are waiting for.
I think so too. Because once you understand what's happening inside your brain, English learning becomes much less frustrating.
So, where do we start?
Let's start with a simple question. Imagine you walk through a forest every day. At first, there isn't a path, just trees and grass. But every day, you walk the same route. After a few weeks, something interesting happens. A small trail begins to appear. After a few months, the trail becomes obvious. And after a few years, it becomes the easiest route through the forest.
Because it's been used so many times.
Exactly. Your brain works the same way. Every thought you repeat creates a mental pathway. Every habit you practice strengthens a connection. Every repetition tells your brain, this route is important.
So, when learners translate, they're strengthening the translation pathway.
Exactly. Let's imagine you've been learning English for 5 years. Every time you hear English, you translate. Every time you want to speak, you translate. Every time you read, you translate. Every time you think, you translate.
That's thousands and thousands of repetitions.
Exactly. And your brain becomes incredibly efficient at that process. The translation pathway becomes a highway, fast, comfortable, familiar.
That's thousands and thousands of repetitions.
Exactly. And your brain becomes incredibly efficient at that process. The translation pathway becomes a highway, fast, comfortable, familiar.
Which explains why it feels automatic.
Right. Your brain isn't choosing translation because it's the best option. It's choosing translation because it's the most familiar option.
That's such an important distinction.
Because many learners think, this is just how my brain works. But that's not true. Your brain learned that habit, which means your brain can learn a different habit too.
That's encouraging.
Very encouraging. Because it means fluency isn't something you're born with, it's something you train.
So, how do we build a new pathway?
We start by creating direct connections. And that's where our first technique comes in, mental substitution.
The exercise you mentioned earlier.
We start by creating direct connections. And that's where our first technique comes in, mental substitution.
The exercise you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. And here's the beautiful thing about mental substitution. It's incredibly simple.
I like simple.
Most learners do. Imagine you're sitting in your room right now. Look around. What do you see?
A chair.
Good. Now here's the question. When you saw the chair, what happened inside your mind? Did you immediately think, chair? Or did you first think the word in your native language and then translate it?
Honestly, I think many learners would translate first.
Exactly. And that's the habit we're trying to change. The next time you see a chair, skip the translation. Go directly to English. Chair.
Just chair.
Just chair. No extra step. No native language. No mental dictionary.
That sounds simple.
It is. But don't confuse simple with ineffective, because this tiny exercise is doing something very powerful.
What's happening?
You're creating a direct connection between an object and an English word. You're teaching your brain that English doesn't need a middleman.
I love that. English doesn't need a middleman.
Exactly. Think about how children learn language. A child sees a dog. They don't translate. They simply connect the image with the word, dog.
The connection is direct.
And that's what we're rebuilding. Not through memorization, not through grammar drills, but through direct association.
Can we do a quick exercise together?
Absolutely. Let's imagine you're listening at home. Look around the room. Notice 5 things.
Okay.
Window,
Okay.
window,
Window.
table,
Table.
phone,
Phone.
door,
Door.
Light.
Light?
Notice what just happened. For a few moments, you were thinking directly in English.
You're right. There wasn't enough time to translate.
Exactly. And that's the goal. Small moments of direct thinking, repeated consistently.
What happens if we keep doing this?
The pathway gets stronger, the connection gets faster, and eventually, English starts appearing automatically.
Just like the translation pathway became automatic.
Exactly. The brain doesn't care which pathway it uses. It simply prefers the pathway that gets used most often.
That's a powerful idea.
And here's where many learners make a mistake. They believe they need to start with full conversations.
Which sounds intimidating.
Very intimidating. Imagine trying to lift heavy weights on your first day at the gym. It wouldn't make much sense.
You'd start small.
Exactly. Mental substitution is small, simple, manageable. And that's why it works.
So, objects are the first step. What's next?
Actions. This is where things become really interesting. Imagine you're drinking coffee. Think, I'm drinking coffee. Imagine you're walking outside. Think, I'm walking to work. Imagine you're opening a door. Think, I'm opening the door.
Now we're connecting actions directly to English.
Exactly. And actions are important because life is made of actions. The more actions you describe in English, the more your daily life becomes English practice.
Without adding extra study time.
Exactly. And that's one of my favorite things about this technique. You don't need a classroom. You don't need a teacher. You don't need a textbook. Your life becomes the classroom.
That's such a different way of thinking about language learning.
Because most people separate English from real life. English exists in a notebook. English exists in a classroom. English exists in an app. But fluent speakers eventually bring English into everyday life.
And that's when things start changing.
Exactly. Now, here's a challenge for everyone listening. For the rest of today, choose one activity. Maybe walking, maybe cooking, maybe cleaning, maybe driving, and spend just 5 minutes describing that activity in English. Not perfectly, just simply.
Almost like narrating your own life.
Exactly. And don't worry if it feels strange, because at first it will.
I think that's important to mention.
Very important. Whenever you build a new habit, awkwardness is part of the process. Awkward doesn't mean wrong. Awkward means new.
I love that.
And if you keep practicing, something amazing begins to happen. You stop translating individual words. Then you stop translating short phrases. Then eventually, you stop translating entire thoughts.
And that's when English starts feeling natural.
Exactly. Now, before we move on, I want to ask listeners a question. Imagine 1 year from today. What would happen if you spent just 5 minutes a day building direct English connections?
5 minutes doesn't sound like much.
But over a year, that's more than 30 hours of brain training. 30 hours spent strengthening the pathway you actually want.
When you put it that way, it sounds significant.
Because it is. Small actions, repeated consistently, create extraordinary results.
And in the next part of today's episode, we're going to take this idea even further.
Because objects and actions are only the beginning. The real breakthrough happens when you start using English to describe your thoughts, your plans, and your daily experiences.
And that's where one of the most powerful fluency techniques comes in.
A technique that many successful learners use every single day, even when they're completely alone.
Stay with us, because this next method could completely change the way you practice speaking English. Welcome back! Earlier, we talked about self-talk narrative and how it helps you practice speaking even when you're alone. But Mike, I think we've reached a problem that almost every English learner faces sooner or later.
I think I know exactly what you're talking about.
You're speaking. Everything is going well. You're building sentences. You're expressing your ideas. And then suddenly, You forget a word.
And for many learners, that's where the conversation ends.
Exactly. It's almost like hitting a wall, one missing word, and suddenly everything stops.
That's one of the biggest traps in language learning, because many learners believe they need the perfect word before they can continue speaking.
And if they can't find it, they freeze.
Exactly. Let's imagine you're having a conversation with someone. Everything is going smoothly. Then you want to use the word umbrella. But for some reason, you can't remember it.
That happens to me all the time.
It happens to everyone. The difference is what happens next. Many learners panic. Their brain starts searching desperately. Umbrella, umbrella, umbrella. Where is it? Meanwhile, the conversation is dying. Sarah, 89. Because all of their attention is focused on finding that one word, Mike. Exactly. Now let's imagine a fluent speaker forgets the same word. Instead of stopping, they simply say, the thing you use when it rains.
Because all of their attention is focused on finding that one word.
Exactly. Communication continues. The conversation survives. And that's the key lesson. Language exists for communication, not perfection.
People would understand immediately.
Because traditional education often teaches us that language is about correct answers, correct vocabulary, correct grammar, correct pronunciation.
I think that's something many learners forget.
Exactly. But real life isn't a test. Real life is communication. And communication is messy. Even native speakers forget words
Almost like every conversation is a test.
all the time. Have you ever heard someone say, you know, that thing, the thing over there, the thing that opens bottles?
Really?
Native speakers do this constantly because they understand something important. The goal is understanding, not perfection.
Of course.
It should be, because many learners are carrying around an impossible standard. They believe fluency means knowing every word.
That's actually very comforting.
Exactly. No human being knows every word, not even in their native language. The difference is that fluent speakers know how to keep moving when a word disappears.
But that's impossible.
Exactly. Let's try another example. Imagine you forget the word microwave. Instead of freezing, you could say, the machine that heats food.
Instead of stopping,
Exactly. Or imagine you forget the word refrigerator. You could say, the thing that keeps food cold.
people would understand immediately.
And that's what matters. The message, not the exact vocabulary.
The message still gets across.
Fluency is knowing what to do when you don't know a word.
So, fluency isn't knowing every word.
And it's a much more useful definition. Now here's something fascinating. Every time you continue speaking despite missing a word, something important happens inside your brain.
That's a completely different way of looking at it.
You build confidence. You prove to yourself that communication can continue. You teach your brain that forgetting a word is not an emergency,
What happens?
because many speaking problems aren't language problems, they're panic problems.
That's powerful.
Absolutely. Imagine you're driving somewhere and suddenly you take a wrong turn. Do you stop the car forever?
Can you explain that?
You find another route. That's exactly what fluent speakers do. When one word disappears, they find another route.
Of course not.
Exactly. And that's why conversations become stressful, because they're constantly searching for perfection.
While many learners sit on the side of the road, waiting for the perfect route to appear.
Exactly. Now let's talk about another powerful tool, something fluent speakers use all the time without even realizing it.
Instead of searching for communication,
Filler phrases.
what's that?
Exactly. Things like, well, that's a good question. Let me think. As far as I know.
Those little phrases people use while they're thinking?
Exactly. And they do something else too. They keep the conversation alive.
Those phrases buy time.
Exactly. Imagine someone asks, "What was the best decision you've ever made?" If you panic, silence appears. But if you say, "That's a really interesting question. Let me think for a second." Now you've given yourself time.
Instead of creating awkward silence,
Exactly. And that's what fluent communication looks like. It's not instant perfection, it's smooth navigation.
without leaving the conversation,
Because that's exactly what language is, a journey, not a test.
I love that phrase, smooth navigation.
Exactly. Now, here's another important lesson. Many learners think confidence comes from speaking perfectly, but that's backwards.
And every learner is learning how to navigate.
Confidence comes from surviving imperfect conversations.
What do you mean?
Think about it. Every time you continue speaking despite mistakes, confidence grows. Every time you recover from forgetting a word, confidence grows. Every time you communicate successfully without being perfect, confidence grows.
Interesting.
Exactly. Not through waiting, not through studying forever, not through memorizing another 1,000 vocabulary words. Confidence comes from experience.
So confidence is built through action.
Now, before we move on, I want everyone listening to remember one sentence. You do not need the perfect word, you need the courage to continue.
That makes so much sense.
Because that one mindset shift can completely change your speaking experience. And speaking of mindset, we're about to discuss another invisible problem that affects millions of English learners:
That's worth remembering.
overthinking.
What's that?
A very big one. Because sometimes the biggest obstacle isn't vocabulary, it isn't grammar, it isn't pronunciation, it's the endless conversation happening inside your own head.
Oh, that's a big one.
And how to escape the trap of analysis paralysis.
And in the next part of today's episode, we're going to explore why intelligent learners often struggle the most with fluency.
I think so too. Because even when learners stop translating, even when they know enough vocabulary, even when they understand grammar, there's still one invisible problem that can hold them back.
Stay with us, because this next lesson could completely change the way you think about speaking English. Welcome back. So far, we've talked about translation, we've talked about direct English thinking, we've talked about self-talk, and we've talked about why you don't need the perfect word to keep a conversation alive. But, Mike, I think we're about to discuss something that affects almost every English learner.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that many intelligent learners suffer from this problem the most.
Overthinking.
Because intelligent people often like to analyze, they like to understand, they like to be correct. And those qualities are wonderful in many situations. But during a conversation, they can become a problem.
Why is that?
Of course, imagine someone asks you a simple question: "What did you do last weekend?" Seems easy enough, right?
Can you explain?
But instead of answering, your brain starts a meeting.
Very easy.
Exactly. One voice says, "Is my grammar correct?" Another voice says, "Maybe there's a better vocabulary word." Another voice says, "What if I pronounce it wrong?" Another voice says, "What if they don't understand me?" And another voice says, "What if I sound stupid?"
A meeting?
And while all those voices are talking, nothing is coming out of your mouth.
That's surprisingly accurate.
Exactly. Psychologists often call this analysis paralysis, thinking so much that action becomes impossible.
Because you're trapped inside your own head.
Absolutely. The strange thing is that overthinking feels productive. It feels like you're improving your answer. It feels like you're reducing mistakes. But in reality, you're often making communication harder.
And I think many learners experience that every day.
Exactly. Imagine trying to ride a bicycle while constantly analyzing every movement.
Because conversations move quickly.
Exactly. Some skills require action. Speaking is one of those skills.
You'd probably fall.
Exactly. Now, here's something fascinating. Do you know who almost never struggles with analysis paralysis when learning a language?
So the more we analyze while speaking, the harder speaking becomes.
Children.
Who?
And they make mistakes constantly.
That's true. Children just speak.
A massive difference. When a child says something incorrectly, they don't spend the next 3 hours thinking about it. They simply continue talking.
That's a huge difference.
Exactly. And that's where confidence begins to disappear, because every mistake becomes evidence. Evidence that they're not good enough. Evidence that they're not ready. Evidence that they should stay silent.
While adults often replay the mistake in their minds.
Not at all. A mistake is simply information. Nothing more, nothing less.
But that's not actually true.
Let's imagine two learners make the exact same mistake. Learner A thinks, "I'm terrible at English." Learner B thinks, "Interesting. I'll remember that next time."
I love that idea.
Exactly. And over time, those reactions create completely different futures. One learner becomes more confident. The other becomes more afraid.
Same mistake, completely different reaction.
Because fluency isn't only about language, it's also about mindset.
That's powerful.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about something many learners believe. They believe confidence comes before speaking.
And mindset determines how we interpret challenges.
And that's the problem. Because confidence doesn't come first. Speaking comes first. Confidence comes later.
I've definitely heard that. People often say, I'll speak when I'm more confident.
Think about learning to swim. Would you wait until you felt confident before entering the water?
That's such an important shift.
Exactly. Confidence is the result of experience, not the prerequisite. The same is true for English.
No, that wouldn't make any sense.
Exactly, because confidence grows through action. Every conversation builds confidence. Every attempt builds confidence. Every mistake survived builds confidence.
So waiting for confidence can actually delay confidence.
Absolutely. Now here's a simple challenge. The next time you're speaking English and you notice yourself overthinking, pause for a moment, take a breath, and ask yourself one question.
I think many listeners need to hear that.
What is my goal right now?
What's the question?
If your goal is perfection, you'll probably stay stuck. If your goal is communication, you'll keep moving.
Interesting.
Because communication allows mistakes. Perfection doesn't. Communication creates progress. Perfection creates pressure.
That's such a simple but powerful distinction.
Exactly. Now imagine something. Imagine you have a conversation tomorrow, and during that conversation, you make 3 grammar mistakes, but the other person understands everything you say. Would that conversation be a success?
And pressure often creates silence.
Then why do so many learners call that failure?
Absolutely.
Exactly. They're measuring perfection instead of connection.
Because they're measuring the wrong thing.
Always. That's why fluent speakers don't obsess over every mistake. They're focused on sharing ideas, telling stories, building relationships, communicating.
And language is about connection.
Exactly. And once you understand that, everything begins to change. You stop treating English like an exam and start treating it like a tool.
Not performing.
Exactly. Now, before we move on, I want everyone listening to remember this sentence. Fluency is not the absence of mistakes. Fluency is the ability to keep communicating despite mistakes.
A tool for communication.
And it might completely change the way you approach English from now on, because once you stop fighting mistakes, you can finally focus on progress.
That's a powerful definition.
Exactly. because understanding these ideas is helpful, but transformation happens through action.
And speaking of progress, we've talked about mindset, we've talked about habits, we've talked about communication, but now it's time to bring everything together.
No complicated schedules, no expensive courses, just 15 minutes a day.
And in the next part of today's episode, we're going to build a simple daily routine, a practical system that helps you stop translating, reduce overthinking, and start thinking directly in English.
Stay with us, because the next section could become the most practical part of today's entire episode.
And those 15 minutes might completely change your relationship with English. And those 15 minutes might completely change your relationship with English.